Hello and welcome to Mr. Young's history class. Today I would like to let you know about one of my favorite topics in the American Revolution. We will be looking at the background information, important figures, and main events of this moment in history. This event is the Siege of Yorktown and the Cornwallis surrender. Hopefully this video will give you a concise overview of the background information, important figures, and main events to understand just why Yorktown is so important. Alright, let's get started. The roots of the American Revolution are deep. One can argue that the ideas of English self-government existed even before the Norman conquest in English history in 1066, but we'll narrow our focus. Specifically, the American Revolution was born out of the European Enlightenment and disputes over taxation and representation in the 13 colonies. These disputes intensified following the end of the 7 Years' War, also known as the French and Indian War. In the spring of 1775, the dispute erupted into a war with the first shots fired at the battles of Lexington and Concord. As the war continued over the following months, the British began to realize that the rebels are tenacious and that the fighting will not easily be won. The British losses at the Battle of Bunker Hill show this. The war continues for years, and the Continental Army finds new leadership under George Washington, a Virginian, and a veteran of the 7 Years' War. French, Prussian, and Spanish support for the Continental Army helps them to survive against the might of the British Empire. But in the later years of the war, the fighting had shifted from New England to the mid-Atlantic colonies. The British forces continued to move into the southern colonies with the hope that the war could be won in the south. Although the British have some victories in the south, Cornwallis's decision to establish a base on the York River will be a fatal mistake. But first, let's take a look at some of the major figures of the war at this point. First, we have General George Washington, commander of the Continental Army. We also have a French general, Comte de Rochambeau. Next, we have a French officer, Marquis de Lafayette. Lafayette was instrumental in gaining French support for Washington's Continental Army. Remember, the English and the French had a long-standing rivalry. Next, we have Admiral de Grasse. He was a commander of the French Navy that played a pivotal role at the Siege of Yorktown. Finally, we have the British officer, Charles Cornwallis. It'll be his forces that surrender to Washington at Yorktown. So, the Siege of Yorktown is important both on land and on sea. So we'll start off with the battle at sea. So going to September 5th, 1781, we see the Battle of the Virginia Capes. Admiral de Grasse meets with the British Navy outside of the Chesapeake Bay. And this battle that takes place drives off the British Navy. And any support that Cornwallis would have needed during the Battle of Yorktown, or the Siege of Yorktown, is pushed off. And the British do not have naval access to the Chesapeake Bay. And because of this, and because of the troop movements of Cornwallis, Washington and Rochambeau make a quick move to lead their armies to the south. So Cornwallis decides that he's going to fortify his troops at Yorktown. He's ordered by General Clinton of the British Army to fortify a seaport, and Yorktown appears to be the most reasonable option. He expects imminent support from Clinton's forces, and he expects that the British Navy will be able to resupply them along the York River. However, with the Battle of the Capes, he is cut off. On October 28th, Washington and Rochambeau arrive at Yorktown. The siege begins with Washington's men taking the right flank or place of honor. Cornwallis is stationed at Yorktown while his cavalry under Tarleton are just across the York River at Gloucester Point. Over the course of the siege, Washington's men dig into the second parallel to get closer to the British lines. Later, Washington's men storm British redoubts 9 and 10. The British attempt to retake these fortifications, but fail due to the arrival of French reinforcements. So, what about the surrender? Well, after a failed attempt to cross the river to Gloucester Point, Cornwallis realizes that his army is trapped at Yorktown. He's trapped by the river, he's trapped on land, and part of his forces are even across the river at Gloucester Point. The surrender then occurs on October 19th, 1781. And although Cornwallis's forces surrender to Washington's Continental Army, the surrender is carried out between two subordinates. I hope that this video was helpful as you learn more about the Yorktown surrender and the end of the American Revolutionary War. Today, we took a look at the events that preceded the Battle of Yorktown, as well as an overview of the siege itself. If you would like to investigate the information discussed in this video on your own, I have included my sources in the description to the video below. Until next time.